Welcome to
Tamarindo Podcast.
Hosted by me, Brenda Gonzalez, a political nerd and nonprofit capacity builder.
And me, Ana Sheila Victorino, a queer well-being enthusiast and mindset coach. We are a Latinx empowerment podcast discussing politics, culture, and how to keep your calma with well-being practices and self-love.
Welcome to the show. Woo! On this episode of Tamarindo, we reflect on the concept of white supremacy, where it shows up, and what we can do about it. We talk to journalist and decolonial educator Constanza Eliana Chinea, who helps us define white supremacy and gives us many resources on how we can confront it.
What's up, Tamarindo amiguis? We are recording on September 15th, so shout out to Mexico, who is celebrating El Grito this evening, and their Independence Day is tomorrow, as well as shout out to Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua, who are all celebrating their independence today, September 15th, when we're recording. So congratulations, that's what I was going to say. Felicidades a todos for their independence, and of course, feliz we're entering Latinx, Hispanic, Latine, whatever you want to call it, Hispanic Heritage Month. So yeah.
Happy for that. Okay, well, great. Ana Sheila, what is new with you? ¿Qué pasa contigo?
So I went to the gym this morning, and I think I just realized body movement for me in the morning makes me feel so much better. And I think I've known that, but it's like when I don't get it in, I don't know how, Brenda, if you always do your workouts in the morning, but I just realized whether it's a workout, that yesterday I didn't get a workout in, but I got a walk in and I still felt so good. So I still felt the benefits of just just moving my body, like getting a little loose.
Yeah, I mean, you've been laying for 8 hours. It would be very good to just move those little huesitos. So yeah, good.
Yeah, so I noticed that, like, it's in the morning. And I think, there's different phases of our lives where we need different things to feel good in the morning, throughout the day. And it's just about paying attention. And sometimes we won't be able to get that full workout in. Sometimes it's a walk, but just noticing, like, what are the things that make you feel better throughout the day and making little tweaks, and it's going to change. So it's really about paying attention to yourself. So it was just a reminder about paying attention to myself, seeing how I feel. And one of the things I love to say, and I probably said it before, is like, to me, maybe I get a workout and maybe I get a walk in, but the thing that I try to do every morning that makes the biggest difference in my day is just starting with cariño. So I will repeat that to everyone, because we can always be reminded to start with cariño. So that's a little like reminder that I had this morning. But I was at the gym and they had Good Morning America on the screen, and it was really cool because they had Eslabón Armado. For folks that are not familiar with them, they're a Mexican regional band that's blowing up. They have a really popular song called Ella Baila Sola, which I believe they do with Peso Pluma. And I'm loving to see this genre take up space on mainstream American television. So very cool to see, made me very happy. So that's what's up with me. Brenda, ¿qué pasa contigo?
Yeah, well, your words always inspire thoughts. So
yes.
For me, I mean, speaking of, like, I hate to admit it, but I quit coffee. I'm not drinking coffee in the morning, and I am seeing so many benefits. I am sleeping better. I'm kinder to my husband, Jeff. I actually feel more energized because I still do the workouts in the morning, and that gives me a lot of energy. So I hate to admit it, but yeah, dropping coffee has worked wonders on me. I maybe have it every other weekend or so as a special treat, but that has been really tremendous benefit for me. And of course, I did work out. I work out at 5:30 in the morning if I get it out to the gym that I've been going to lately. But I also started taking on one-on-one personal training clients. So shout out to my clients. And so I had a workout this morning before everything today. So yeah, I love getting that movement in the morning.
I love that. And I've noticed that the earlier I can get the workout in too, or the earlier that whatever it is, what kind of body movement it is, the earlier, the better. So for me, I'm not on your level, Brenda, but I'm trying to inch up to get it in earlier, because it does feel better when it's like in the quiet of the morning. But I'm curious, like, about, how did you determine that it was coffee? Like, how did you try this? Because, we're talking about little tweaks that we can make and seeing how.
Well, I've mentioned it before on this podcast that I've known that coffee is a trigger for me. It makes me more anxious. It makes me more angry. It makes me more irritable. And Jeff has been telling me this forever. He's like, "Did you have coffee?" Like, he just knows. So that's been the biggest reminder, is him. And other benefits too. I mean, I think like I also, I read apparently what happens when you're 40 is that you get thirstier, and drinking coffee also makes me thirstier. So I just wanted to kind of eliminate that. Speaking of made you thirsty, even drinking some water. So yeah, so like all of those things, I do feel so much better eliminating the coffee. So that's how I knew, is that Jeff was telling me like, "Cálmate, you're too crazy with the coffee." So yeah.
You see more chill right now, Brenda. So I'm just kidding, but
I mean, awesome. I bet you did notice, because it's made a significant difference.
Love that.
All right. Well, I want to dive into some announcements, some housekeeping for our listeners. So first, I want to tell you all, and you've heard it before, but I'm going to tell you again, that I am working with Delcy Sandoval, the host of the Ocupación podcast. We are hosting a phenomenal retreat to Puebla, Mexico. It is going to be February 15th through the 19th of next year, so you have plenty of time to get organized. But I want to encourage you to get connected soon, because we will sell out. Our goal is to get 10 rooms in order to lock in the amazing rate that we have. And so folks have already started, a lot of people have applied. The next step is the deposit. We're working very closely individually with each person. So there's still time for you all to complete your application. The application is very simple. It's really more to make sure that you are aligned with the mission and vision of Encuentro. And what we're trying to do is bring together anybody that's got even a little teeny tiny bit of creativity in them and wants to connect with other folks that've got a little bit of creativity in them. You don't have to be a podcaster. You don't have to have have to be a graphic designer. You don't have to be well in it. You just have to have some sort of interest in creativity. And that's it, and know what this is about, and know what Ocupación is about, and feel like that speaks to you. So you are invited. The cost is $1,600, and that includes everything. That is 4 nights at an amazing luxury, like literally, like I'm so excited about this hotel. A luxurious hotel, that one of the nicest and most recent openings in Puebla. It is a health-centered hotel, so there's going to be wellness activities within the hotel. It's got a spa. We're going to do group yoga. We're going to do group meditation. We're going to do a group hike. We're going to go to Tepoztlán and do a group hike. We're going to go to Cholula and see the largest pyramid by volume in the world. We're going to eat amazing food, because Puebla has incredible food. And all of that is covered in that $1,600 price, or $1,400 per person if you're willing to share a room with another Encuentro participant. So I think it's a wonderful investment. You're going to get not only all that, but also 3 skill building workshops and the opportunity to connect with other folks from all over the country that are also joining us. We've got folks that have applied so far. We've got nonprofit leaders. We've got disability rights advocates. We've got artists, we've got writers, and we've got a few podcasters. So many amazing and incredible people have already signed up. And you can get all the information. You could go to tamarindopodcast.com/encuentro, and all of that will be right there. You can also reach out to me directly. You can email me at brenda@tamarindopodcast.com if you have any questions whatsoever. So very excited about that.
I love that. And I think this is really perfect for folks. Like if y'all have been itching, like dreaming of writing, of creating, and haven't been able to get that off the ground, these kinds of events, I think, can be really fruitful for that. And really putting yourself in a different environment that's really supporting that creation can really make a difference. So if y'all have been sitting on something and wanting to create, wanting to write, these are the kinds of events that can really spark that. So y'all, we want to see you sign up. We want to see you there. We want to see you create.
Yes. Thank you, Ana Sheila. What else do we have in store?
We've got another event coming up, y'all. Specifically, if you're in the LA area, we want to invite you to join us for Cultivating Financial Liberation. It's an in-person event at the Pop Pop, an independent bookstore in Highland Park, on October 5th. Join us for a workshop where we will uncover the money beliefs that are holding us back, make talking about money fun and accessible, and answer your financial questions around budgeting, credit, and investing. And I know, y'all, money can be a scary topic. It can be hard for us to talk about these things. We maybe feel shame or other emotions, but I promise y'all, this will be fun. This will be fun. Our speaker who's leading the workshop is so fun. And we really want to change the relationship that we have with money. So y'all come through. I'll let Brenda speak a little bit more on it.
Yes. Please come through. So we're going to speak to money coach Charlie Stover, a formerly undocumented digital nomad helping first-gen clients embody their millionaire selves. And what Charlie wants to do, and we're all about it, is we want all of you to perreo your way to first gen prosperity. So there will be dancing, there will be twerking, and you don't have to do any of this, but I assure you that Charlie
will be twerking for all of us.
Yes. And so it's October 5th. Technically, it starts at 6, and it's at an amazing bookshop, as Ana Sheila just shared. So come a little early, shop. Maybe you can get a drink next door. There's an adorable bar next door. But the program will officially start at 6:30. That gives you a big wiggle room to find parking, get settled, and join us. It is at 5002 York Boulevard. That's where the Pop Hop is. And we are making it free. So you could choose to donate to participate, or you could just join for free. And you can find that at Tamarindo Podcast /events. All right. Anything else you'd like to say about our events? I think we're good, right?
We're excited. We're excited.
We're exciting. We're excited and we're exciting. Okay.
Yes.
So now we're going to shift to who we've got today. So today we have Constanza Eliana Chinea, a brown Latina Boricua decolonial educator, journalist, producer, speaker, activist, and mental wellness advocate. I love that, right? So many things. She is the co-host and the producer of the Stranger Fruit show and podcast, and a freelance journalist with multiple media outlets, including LA Times, De Los. And this is a great conversation, Ana Sheila. I know that we take turns on who we get to interview, but we both really wanted to get at this topic, and we're so excited to get to speak to Constanza about this. We are talking about white supremacy, what it means, how it shows up, and what we can do about it. So Ana Sheila, as we think about white supremacy, again, you've already called out that we're recording on September 15th. It's our time. Es nuestro tiempo. It's Hispanic Heritage Month. I'm curious about thinking about white supremacy within that context of this special time of year where all kinds of firms, corporations are thinking about our community. What are your thoughts? How do you think about those two things at this time?
I think what sticks out to me, and the work that I want to keep doing, has been recognizing how white supremacy was ingrained in a lot of the countries that we come from, right? And who's been celebrated and who's been highlighted have often been the white, at least when we're from Mexico, the white Mexicans, right? Or wherever country you're from. So for me, that's what continues to be at the forefront, is continuing to dismantle how white supremacy has been, and racism and colorism has been ingrained in me, and continuing to identify those points of learning and unlearning, and continuing to fight against anti-Black, anti-Indigenous sentiment and activities, right? So I think that's what stands out to me, is continuing to do that work, and doing that through the work on the show, and what I am highlighting, and how I'm spending my time and energy. So that's what stands out off top. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, yes, all of that, of course, and also being thoughtful about look, I can word is not respect. What's the word? I can appreciate the value of numbers, the value of getting our community together, because as a whole, we represent such a big part of the fabric of who this country is. And there are many things that do connect us. And so for sometimes for just political clout and progress, I see the value of having a term like Latino or Hispanic or whatever insert term here, and grouping us. But I think it is important, as you just called out, is that as we do this, it also is at the same time important to be thoughtful about how we choose certain words. So for instance, it makes me think of the actress Anya Taylor-Joy, who is Latina technically. I mean, she is Latina. She's from Argentina. She speaks Spanish, all these things. And she herself has kind of said hey, cálmate. When people say, oh, the first woman of color to be nominated, she's listen, I know that I'm not a woman of color. So right. I think that's the opportunity that we have, is we can be excited that there's a Latina that's being that's successful, but let's also check when we're being grouped incorrectly. Yeah. When we for example, I don't consider myself a person of color. I'm very thougthoughtful about not co-opting that word, even though I am, as you have said to me, Ana Sheila, is you have a little melanin. I know. Soy una mezcla, and I tan, and I look great in the tan. But I'm also thoughtful that that doesn't feel like the term that I should be using. And so
Yeah.
there's lots of us that I think that's what it is. It's an exercise in being reflective and thoughtful in the way we identify ourselves, while at the same time recognizing that this is an important time to celebrate the contributions of Latinos in this country and the progress we've made and the much distance still needed for us to be fully included in our society, in this society. So
I love that. I think
those are our
that
thoughts.
what a great way to capture that, Brenda. It's a yes, we can celebrate and we can be thoughtfully reflective and challenge ourselves también.
Yeah, and that's pretty much some of the themes that we talk about with Constanza Eliana Chinea. Let's hear our conversation with her now. Constanza Eliana Chinea, welcome to Tamarindo. It's such a joy to have you. How are you doing this morning?
Good, good. Thank you for having me.
Well, before we dive in, I know you have many hats, as many of us do, but one of them is a decolonial educator. Can you walk us through what that means?
Yeah, so basically I focus on decolonization through mindset work, through historical work and references, and really just kind of taking a look at what our colonial history has been and how we can kind of go back to either indigenous ways of thinking and being, or how we can exist in a colonial, set and in colonial environment in ways that don't perpetuate the worst parts of colonization.
Perfect. And I know that you got into this work after spending some time in the wellness industry. Can you talk to us a little bit about what were some of the problems that you confronted with the wellness industry that pushed you into this work today?
Yeah, I think the wellness industry definitely got its own little call out in 2020 for just kind of perpetuating a lot of those kind of conspiracy theories around health and wellness, particularly when it came to COVID. And I think that was really for mainstream. That was just one little snippet of what the wellness industry kind of encompassed. I was in it for about 12 years, particularly in the yoga industry. And there were many amazing things about that industry, but there was also a lot of perpetuation of white supremacy, a lot of colonial standards, a lot of appropriation of culture. And over time, as I gained more decolonial literacy and education, I myself just felt like I really was also perpetuating a lot of the same things that I was hoping not to do in my own culture. And so I think the wellness industry, for a lot of reasons, really invites people to seek alternative healthcare. And that can be both a really good thing and a really bad thing. And I think that leads people down the spiritual side of things, which can be counter religious, but in a lot of ways very cultish as well. So it was just a lot. It was a lot for me to kind of wrap my head around after really understanding how white supremacy operates in the wellness industry and how colonization kind of permeates through. And I just felt like my skills and my education would be better suited outside of that industry.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned white supremacy. This is definitely something that we mention a lot on this podcast and other places, and we're often saying we're pushing against white supremacy. But I'd like to back up a little bit, and if you were to define this, how would you define white supremacy? What does it look like, and how do we, even though those of us that are well-meaning, internalize white supremacy?
Yeah, for sure. So really just a very quick historical breakdown of it. It really is just the standard of Europeans, right? Like that standard of being highly educated, that standard of white skin being the best, being the most beautiful, blue eyes, blonde hair being the most beautiful. The ideology of whiteness is something that has been widely studied by many academics and scholars, and many books have been written on it. But the standard of whiteness has also been heavily experienced by Black and Brown people. And so there's both the lived experience and the tangible things that we have been able to study through academia that kind of put the two together, right? Like the very logical side of things and the experiential side of things. And so for me, white supremacy is, again, just that standard that white is best, white is right, and that we, meaning people of color, must aspire to be as close to whiteness as possible. And that is the supremacist side of things. And I think a lot of people have this idea that white supremacy means KKK. It's like the most extreme, the most violent side is what most people jump towards. And that is one example of what that is. But white supremacy is also an ideology that has been born out of Europe, and through colonization to the West, it has really created a system and an industry, really, if you kind of take a look at how capitalism and white supremacy work together, it has created a system that has wreaked havoc on people of color, indigenous people, African descendants, Africans in general, and Asians. And so for me, it's really important to remember that white supremacy isn't just the most extreme that you can think of. It's also the way that we move, the way that we do business, the way that we relate to each other, the way that we raise our families, the way that the family structure even looks like, and also beauty standards. So it kind of has permeated all over. My best example that I can give is a story that I did a couple of years ago through a workshop that the skin whitening cream industry is worth billions and billions of dollars. The two main companies, the two major companies that create the creams are European owned. And the countries that consume and have the widest clientele, largest clientele of skin whitening creams are African countries and Asian countries. And so that kind of tells you right there that white supremacy is a mindset. It's definitely a mindset that has mostly affected Black and brown people and indigenous people in general. And it's something that really needs to be battled on a daily basis.
Yes, no, thank you for breaking that down for us. As you're answering this, I'm also considering the date that we're recording. This is the September 15th. It's kicking off Hispanic Heritage Month, Latina Heritage Month, whatever word you want to use, Heritage Month. And I'd love for you to just for a moment kind of think about how do we as Latinos, Latine, Latinx, and all of us that might feel under that umbrella, how can we be thoughtful about white supremacy as we think about ourselves as a group and all the challenges that come with grouping us for a lot of the things that you just mentioned?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's in the word Hispanic, if you just kind of take a look at that. Hispaniola is something that was brought to us by way of Spain. And when I say us, I mean the Caribbean. I think a lot of people have a misconception, particularly once Columbus Day rolls around, that Columbus discovered America. He did not. He actually ran into, by accident, he ran into Haiti or Haiti and colonized it viciously and violently. And so he called the whole of the Caribbean Hispaniola. And that was adopted by the United States, and Hispanic was a label that was created for all Spanish-speaking Latin American countries, including the Caribbean, Central and South America. So that is white supremacy right there. White supremacy in Spain was something that was very complicated because it was, Spain is right above Africa. The coast of Africa. And so there was a lot of migration in Spain, but the people who held the power, the people who colonized viciously, the people who colonized by way of religious supremacy as well, were white Spaniards. And those were the people and the ideologies that were brought over to the Caribbean and the rest of Latin America once the rest of Latin America was colonized. So we have to remember that wasn't that long ago. If we take a look at the wider history of humanity, that has only been 500 years worth of our history. And so you can't really get rid of an ideology overnight. It takes a lot of time, and it's done through the work of Indigenous and Black activists and scholars, and that is something that has to be respected and something that has to be acknowledged. I think that when it comes to things like Hispanic Heritage Month or Latina Heritage Month, we have to remember that these terms were created to lump us all together into one category. There's a lot of mixture around like ethnicity and race and what does that mean and who are Hispanics and what do Hispanics do and how do they vote and how can we get them to vote the way that we want them to vote? How do we get them to purchase and buy into the movies that we want them to purchase into and buy into? And so there's a lot of white supremacists and capitalism kind of coinciding and working together at the same time. And so I think heritage is definitely something that we should celebrate. I think it's a beautiful thing. I also think that we have to remember that the type of heritage that white supremacy wants us to celebrate is not exactly what we should be celebrating.
Yeah, no, thank you. This is always such a great time to be reflective of that because it's complicated at the same time as we recognize that the grouping is a factor of white supremacy and capitalism. We also know that our community is so forgotten. So if there is these couple of weeks that people can, at least for a moment, learn something, if by accident, that's the positive of it. But of course, I think it's really important to, as you just said, let's be reflective, let's be thoughtful, and let's learn from BIPOC scholars and artists and people like you so that we could be more thoughtful as we think about these things. And I'd like to go into that a little bit more. What would be some of the ways that we could challenge white supremacy? You kind of gave some recommendations. What else? What are other things that listeners could do as they're kind of grappling with this and thinking about ways to identify it and fight it?
Before I answer that question, I just want to see where that sound is coming from. I don't know if you could hear it while I was talking earlier.
No.
But I'm just going to make sure that you can. Okay. Could you hear that when, like, the banging?
No, actually, no.
Okay.
So you might be
Close
fine.
the door.
And
okay, cool.
if my husband's in another room having a meeting, so if you can't hear him.
Okay, good. Okay, can you just re-ask the question one more time? Sorry.
Yes, no problem. No problem. I think you kind of gave us some solutions of the ways that we could fight against white supremacy, like learning from BIPOC scholars. What are some other things? What are some other recommendations for folks that want to be thoughtful about how they identify white supremacy in the way that they've internalized it and how they could push back against it?
Yeah, I think my biggest thing is always question everything. Where did that come from? Why do we, celebrate this thing? Where does this word stem from or originate from? Where does this holiday, originate from? I think really being curious about your own history, the things that you say on a daily basis, the things that seem traditional that might not necessarily be traditional or might be very new by way of tradition. I think that's all a really, really great place to start. A lot of holidays are really rooted in colonization. So that's a really great place to kind of observe and talk with your family members and talk with your friends about, well, have we ever actually looked into the true history of this and why this has happened and why this is a holiday that we celebrate? Why do we celebrate it in the way that we do? One of the things that I started questioning as a Boricua in Puerto Rico, we celebrate the Three Magic Kings Day. And for me, that was definitely something that I never questioned. As a kid, I was always so excited for that day.
Three gifts.
Yeah. And it was the very last holiday in the winter time. I mean, Puerto Rico doesn't have a winter, but
Yeah,
it's the last holiday of that season. And so it's a really, really exciting one, right? Especially for kids. And the way that the story is told to kids is very specific and it's very exciting. And I never questioned it. And it wasn't until I really started doing my research and I started looking into the proper history of it. And I started to see, oh, so Christianity was actually brought to us by way of colonial Spain, and how the story kind of got twisted and molded over time into the holiday that we know it today, into the traditions that we know it today. I think it's just something to be really aware of. I did a story on Christmas in general, Easter, that's another one. And even Columbus Day. I think Columbus Day is probably the best place to start. So once you really start questioning and getting curious about your own history, your lineage, I think that can kind of lead you down the rabbit hole. And I think decolonization gets a bad rap of being like, oh, anybody who is into decolonization is just like such a party pooper. Like it's not fun to be around them and things like that. And sure, certainly sometimes people can like put a damper on things. But I think it's also really important that in order to start breaking down the colonial structure and white supremacist structure, that it starts by educating yourself. And education is actually something that was weaponized against people of color, in particular Indigenous and Black African descendants. Education was taken away from them because if you were educated, then you were knowledgeable. And if you were knowledgeable, you would resist and you would riot and you would rebel. And that was definitely something that they didn't want. And so once you choose to be ignorant, you're kind of giving into that colonial mindset already. So being curious, asking a lot of questions, and then just reading, getting to know activists, getting to know Indigenous activists in particular, getting into the land back movement, getting into anti-policing movements and things like that, that may not necessarily seem decolonial outright, but actually are. The abolitionist movement is very decolonial in nature, and community driven. So once you really start taking a look at those types of community structures, then you really start going down the rabbit hole of like decolonizing pretty much everything.
Yeah, perfect. And how did it happen for you? Like, I mean, and you kind of talked a little bit about the wellness industry, but what were some of the places where you kind of started and identified, oh, this is decolonization, hard word to say.
Yeah.
And this is why I want to step into this.
Yeah, so it actually happened by way of just my growing up and my personal experience being from Puerto Rico and living there and having two native parents who were very educated on the colonization of Puerto Rico. That was a constant conversation for us, both growing up and also living in the United States. And so it did create a little bit of a duality for me because both I understood that colonization was a bad thing, but I was also living in the United States, and assimilation was something that was to be expected of all Latinos in general. And so it was a very confusing duality. And so, of course, that's going to create a lot of confusion for a teenager trying to grow up in the United States. But at the same time, I still had in the back of my head, because it was in constant conversation with family members, that colonization was a bad thing. And so once I started to kind of mature a little bit and start to see, you know what, there are gaps in my knowledge that I don't fully understand. Let me look into it. Once I started getting into social justice activism as well and anti-racist movements, it just seemed like a natural progression to learn about decolonization in a much deeper way. So for me, it really started with activism. It started with abolitionist movements and really starting to read more about abolition and decolonization. One book that is really, really helpful, written by a Latino, a Brazilian, is oh my gosh, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Mm-hmm. That the translation of it in English I read, but you can also read it in Spanish and Portuguese and, you know, a whole host of other languages that it has been translated into. That one, it's pretty dense. It's a little bit hard to read if you don't have like a full knowledge of like the big words, but it is a really great introduction into oppressive systems and how to break down oppressive systems. And one of the biggest things that the author talks about in that book, is education and literacy, and how important that is, and how it has been used by the oppressor against the oppressed to keep them fighting within each other, fighting amongst each other, fighting against each other, and, you know, weaponized as a tool for poverty as well. And that is another colonial structure. Prior to colonization, our communities were not poor. They were community centered they were very much about like, you know, what you can bring to the community. When one person eats, everybody eats. And poverty is a structure of colonialism and Europe. And so once you start to really understand what the author is saying in this book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, I think that really opened my eyes a lot to some of the things that I had already learned in the social justice movements. But I think that's a great place to start. That's a really great book, and it's written by a Latino.
Excellent. All right. Well, you've given us so much to learn and so much to continue our learning. And a couple more questions that I have for you. One is, I know that obviously you're extremely knowledgeable as you've given this gift to us today. Where can folks get connected with more of your workshops?
Yeah, so I'm actually currently going through a little bit of a rebrand. So I am going to clean up my courses and my workshops a little bit more, but you can still find them on my website, embodyinclusivity.com. And you can, you know, start taking some of the anti-racist courses that I have up on there and some of the anti-oppression courses that I have. I am going to be including, now that I've entered the journalism space, so I left the wellness industry to become a journalist, because I think it's so important for people to be educated. And I really wanted to do it in an ethical way. And so journalism has a lot of ethics behind it. And learning how to tell stories that are relatable to people, and in particular the gap in representation that media has, I really wanted to enter that space. So I've been a journalist for the last 2 years and really focusing on those stories. So you can find me now as an LA Times contributor, and I will be doing a lot more things for the Delos, which is the Latino initiative of the LA Times. It's brand new, but you can find me there. Some of my stories there that will be posted this month. And on my social media at Eliana Chinea.
Excellent. Thank you. And congratulations on all the great work in journalism. Amazing about Delos. I think it's phenomenal and it's so great. I can't wait to start reading your work there as well. Thank you so much for spending time with us here on Tamarindo. If there's anything else you'd like our listeners to know, please, this is your open platform.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad that we were finally able to do it. I know it's a long time coming, so I appreciate the invite. Yeah, I think if I could leave anybody with as something, it's, you know, really going back to our indigenous ways, I think is probably something that we should aspire to. And, you know, indigenous identity is something that shouldn't be taken lightly. I don't think everybody is indigenous. I'm not one of those people. I think that, you know, through colonization has made that very complicated. However, I do think that there are indigenous leaders that we can follow and we can support, especially with the land back movement, and really learning about how to have that sort of community mindset where collaboration and support are like the really main tenets of that. So really look into your roots, look into your history, look into your lineages. Most people have more than one, and start looking into what were some of the indigenous mindsets there, and not to appropriate them, but to learn from them and support the indigenous leaders that we currently have. So.
Absolutely. All right. With that, thank you so much. And we will read all your work shortly. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Amazing. Just such a wealth of information. And you all have some reading to do and some websites to check out. So with that, Ana Sheila, it's time for our rapid fire closeout questions that we like to do. So would you please start with your matraca?
My matraca. It's going to be a little bit long. This could be 3. Brenda, apologies in advance. I'm just playing. But my matraca, in honor of the month, it's actually going to Mexico. And I've been, you know, we've been on break for a bit. So I've been saving some of these. Some of these are a little bit newer than others. But I have been loving all the beautiful progressive news that have been coming out of the country recently. I'm going to highlight 3 really quickly. Number 1, Wendy Guevara became the first trans woman to win a Mexican reality TV series. She was on a show called La Casa de los Famosos, Mexico, which is similar, for folks that aren't familiar, it's similar to the show Big Brother here in the US. And she was selected, so meaning fans voted for her, and she was the winner with 18.2 million fan votes. That's how popular this show is. And to see her win this show, I think it's really a really beautiful thing for Mexico. I've seen her, she's dynamic, she deserved it. So it's really beautiful to see that. So number 1. Number 2, Mexico will have a woman president. Both the leading candidates selected by their parties, by the two leading parties, are Claudia Sheinbaum and Xochitl Galvez. So we will have a woman president, and that's just amazing, period, right?
Absolutely.
And then number three, Mexico's Supreme Court decriminalized abortion in the whole country. And I think that's just so beautiful to see. I think it's very inspiring and needed, especially with what we're seeing in the US, to see Mexico advance in these ways. So that's been giving me a lot of joy to see that happening.
Yes, I love it. I love it. It makes me think of the little meme. Does that make me better than you? It does. It does.
It does.
Mexico's better than us. It does.
I love it. What about you, Brenda? I know you co-sign all these también, pero what else you got?
Yes, I want to give my matraca to a podcast called Que Me Cuentas Podcast with Jaime Mallorquín and Yesenia Chavez. It is a beautiful podcast. It makes me think. So one surprise that y'all will have later on is that Ana Sheila and I got to guest host an episode of Risk, which is one of our favorite storytelling podcasts. And here is another storytelling podcast that I want to recommend. It's called Que Me Cuentas. Features Latinx storytellers. And I love it. I mean, all the stories that I've heard on the podcast have been really engaging, really wonderful. And then I had an opportunity to go to a live event and just see the action live and in the flesh. So I just want to say matraca to Que Me Cuentas podcast, and to all the folks involved, just keep doing it. It's great. Keep it going.
Love that. Okay, what about basura, Brenda? What are you putting in la basura this week?
This is silly, but truly, I know I can't believe it. I can't believe we're already like 3 years out of this pandemic. It feels like just yesterday. And so there are some more in-person events, but I swear to God, like the like what I have to calculate is like, is it 10 minutes from my house? Can I take the metro? Is it worth me putting on makeup on? Is it worth me putting a bra on? Do I have to fucking brush my hair? If all of those things, like if it's yes to all those, and it's like not like if one of them is like more like if like I have to be inconvenienced in any one of those ways, it's basura. I'm not going. So basura to any event that is not like super convenient for me.
And you're just being intentional. Your time is precious. Your presence is precious. So I get that. And speaking of, Brenda, of like deciding what to do, I'm actually curious, and I'm asking you this, and we'll give a shout out to this event. Are you going to Armando Ibanez, the creator of Andaki Tale's birthday party tonight?
Yes. Okay. He's worth it. Okay. First of all, it's close to my house. He's amazing. I already put makeup on because I'm on here on this podcast. So yeah.
So you're gonna keep right. Are you gonna maybe put a little powder to like freshen it up for tonight?
Yeah. Well, I have very dry skin, so I can't do powder. This right here that already looks powdered AF is not. It's just my skin. It's just my skin.
Well, it looks
like
great.
A freaking lagartija. Pero yeah, I'm going. You going?
I think I'm gonna go. I'm on the fence, but I might show up. So I might see you tonight in the flesh. So quick shout out. Y'all check out Andaki Tales. It's on YouTube. It's the last season. It's a great series. I highly recommend it. Y'all check it out. Andaki Tales will include a link in the notes, but it's his birthday, the creator's birthday today. So we might celebrate there.
Feliz cumpleaños. Great. What's your basura?
My basura. So this is a basura question mark. So this has happened over the summer. Speaking of música regional, another group that's really been blowing up is called Yaritza y su Esencia. I'm actually a really big fan. She's a young queer woman. So it's been really cool to see also just acceptance of more queer artists in this genre, also with Grupo Firme, who also has one of their members is queer. So they recently were in Mexico City because they're on tour. They were on tour. And they were doing an interview, and they're all really young, by the way. She's like 16. I think her cousin, the other folks are like very young. And they asked them like something about Mexico, right? And so they basically
about Mexico City specifically.
About Mexico City, and they shared that they didn't really, that it was very loud, that in Washington it was more quiet because they're Mexican American, so they live in Washington, and that it was very loud and it was quiet in Washington, and that they didn't really like Mexican food, or it didn't like spicy
They didn't like the food. They didn't like the food, yes.
And they didn't like spicy, and they didn't like spicy that like they couldn't handle it. So that's what they said in this interview in Mexico City. So there was a very strong backlash because a lot of their audience is Mexican American, but also a big portion of their audience is in Mexico. And so they were very beloved up until this point when they had this interview. So the backlash that they received was now questioning how Mexican they were, right? To be doing this music in this genre. Also, you started seeing some anti-indigenous and racist statements about how, they barely know Spanish, or they're not really Mexican, pero tienen el nopal en la frente, like, qué vergüenza, those kinds of comments. So I want to...
that many of us hear when we go visit our family, Sangrona in Mexico sometimes.
Right,
yes.
right. So I'm curious, Brenda, I'll share how I think, but if you heard about this, and what are your
Of course I heard about it. It was all over the internet.
Yes,
it was all over the internet. We're a little late, but it's still relevant, the issues that popped up. Of course, I heard about it. Mm-hmm. And you know what? At the end of the day, they win because I had never heard of them before, and now I know who they are. So at the end of the day, like, I think they win, and the egg is in the face of all the ones that said stupid, like, things that make them sound racist, that make them sound classist, that make them sound, just all like, at the end they win, and so those are the thoughts that I have.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they could have done that. That wasn't their best interview. They could have been more thoughtful. And they're also young, and I think their experience reflects the experience of a lot of, like, Mexican American teens, right? That kind of feel in between, and there's some things they really enjoy about their culture, other things that feel a little bit more foreign. But I think it was really unfortunate to see, like, the turn that some of the backlash took. Yeah. So.
Yes, absolutely. It raised some wonderful conversations about but I think ultimately I'm excited that now I know their name.
Yeah, and I'm actually a fan, and I wanted to go see a concert. I wasn't able to see them, but I actually really loved Yaritza's voice. Love that she's queer. But yeah, we're a little bit late on this, but since I wanted to bring it up because there are a lot of relevant themes that we can relate to. Okay, and then Brenda, what about your calma? What's been keeping you grounded the last few weeks?
Well, along with the theme we started off this morning of, like, just movement in the morning, my calma is always being able to teach at the Heartbeat House on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7 a.m. Pacific time. Also virtual. You could watch it live virtually. I have actually most of my students, I have pretty much a half and half. Half of my students are on the big screen and they're doing it from home, and my in-person students can see them. We all know each other, so it's really wonderful and fun. And also you could do it on demand. So you don't have to do it at 7 a.m. Pacific time. Anywhere in the world you could do it. It's about $12 a class. I get paid half of that, so I'm not making a whole lot of money, but I love it. I love doing it. So if you all can join, it's at heartbeathouse.net. You can sign up to be at my class. It's absolutely so much fun. And then I have my one-on-one personal training clients. That's been a lot of joy as well. So just hit me up. So that's what's giving me some calma. What about you, Ana Sheila? What is keeping you grounded?
I think it's I was reflecting on this, and I think it's the resilience that I've built up. So, just knowing that I've done hard things, when I'm doing things that kind of produce anxiety in me. So for example, next week I have a really busy week. Like, we have an event Tuesday and Wednesday, Brenda and I do. And then on Monday, I also have to go and drive out and, like, be on a podcast. So it's like back-to-back things that require a lot of my energy and presence, that in the past would have been really scary to be like, how am I going to do 3 things? I can't do it. And I think, I struggled a lot with anxiety, and now what's really been helping me is sort of the little voice that reminds me, you have done it, you can do it. Here are the examples of how you've done it, and you're going to do it. And that it's going to be rewarding, that it's going to help you grow. So I think just the resilience and the voice, the practice, like the coach on my shoulder that used to be sort of, that wasn't the best coach before, and how I've, developed my little coach on my shoulder and to really build me up and allow me to keep growing and doing scary, hard things. So
that's awesome. I imagine that coach, like, literally like a real buff. So the coach is buff.
Yeah,
you're toning up and just bulking up.
Yeah, they're like, come on, you got this, Ana Sheila. You're fucking boss.
You got this.
But,
I love it. Well, that is wonderful, and exactly as you described it, I think those words are very helpful for listeners as well that are confronting hard things. You have done it. There's examples of you doing it, and when you're done doing it, you feel amazing. So that's what that coach is saying. All right. Yes. Well, thank you with that, y'all. We love you, and we need you to share this episode. We need you to write an Apple Podcast review They are so helpful. They're all so sweet. So please go to Apple Podcasts and write us a little love note. You can always contact us. Everything that has to do with us, you can find it at tamarindopodcast.com. Follow us on Instagram at Tamarindo Podcast. Follow us on X. You can follow us there. It's at Tamarindo Cast. Follow us on LinkedIn. We get down on LinkedIn. We also have a Facebook group. We're on all the things. Follow us at all the places. With that, ponte un suéter.
Bye, y'all. Abrazos, besos. Ciao.
Ciao. Tamarindo Podcast is Brenda Gonzalez and Ana Sheila Victorino, with production support from Josie Melendez and Augusto Martinez Delgado of Sonoro Media. Our theme song is by Jeff Ricards. If you like our show, please rate and review Tamarindo Podcast or share an episode with a friend.